And I'm Nick.
And it's Tuesday with Team RCIA.
And we received a message this week about a team member who's having trouble with one of their catechumens.
Mm-hmm. And the specific way that they worded the question was that they have a catechumen who doesn't quite get the theology, has a difficulty understanding the content.
Yeah, so this person has faith, according to the team member, but struggles with the content or the theology, and they want to know, the team member wants to know how we get stuff to the level that the person needs to experience it.
Yeah, and so there were a lot of layers to responding to this question. We had to kind of ask more questions of the person asking the question, because there's no black and white answer that fits every context. You have to know kind of what's going on. So we asked a few more questions.
But when we heard that the catechumen has faith, mm-hmm. then we know right away we're not dealing with someone who's never heard the good news. We're dealing with someone who's had that initial conversion, and now they're on a journey to understand what their encounter with Christ means. And they continue to have encounters with Christ. So they continue to show up at the catechetical sessions, for example. They come to Sunday Mass. They're participating in the activities of the parish. They do really this seeker does a rather extensive breaking open the Word every week, mm-hmm. with the catechumenate team and the other seekers, around the Sunday reading. So they've got a lot going on with encounters with Christ.
But I think after we started digging deeper a little bit, it started sounding like where the seeker was struggling was when I think they were doing Lectio or some kind of breaking open the Word. After that, when the catechist would get into more of a catechetical mode, sort of presenting the teaching of the church, and the other catechumens in the group were sort of, their motivation for being there was really more of that intellectual curiosity about Catholicism. And that was kind of frustrating this other catechumen who was feeling kind of the stuff was going over his head.
Yeah. Here's where I'm confused, or where I get a little bit stuck trying to answer questions like these, because when we talk about content of the faith, a lot of us want to turn right away to the catechism or the encyclicals from the Pope or the Bible, or, where's our content? The word content, where's the content written down? And how do we, in a sense, bring it down to the level of people who don't have our vocabulary, don't have our understanding of the content? How do we break it down into a simpler format? And really, I don't think that's what Jesus did. When Jesus was ministering to the disciples or ministering to the crowds, he would do things that were primarily around healing or around touching people's hearts. He would do, like when you think of the story of the woman at the well, there wasn't a lot of teaching going on there in the sense of, here's what the law says. It was more of an interacting with her, listening to her wounds and trying to heal her wounds.
Mm-hmm. And so I think for all of us, a good principle in terms of when we think of content, let's shift our paradigm to thinking that the content is something outside of our experience, and to recognize that the content, the spirit that has been given to all people, is already implanted in the hearts of our catechumens. That's why they're there. That's why they're catechumens, because the Spirit called them and they responded in some way. And so the first thing about content is that the content is already embedded in the life of your catechumen. Our first step then as catechists is to listen very clearly, very carefully. So we have to ask questions before we dive deep into quote unquote our content, whatever catechetical content, because the content is already there. So what kinds of questions did you tell this questioner?
Right, just to springboard a little bit off what you said, that makes me remember a phrase we like to use around here, which is, you are not the catechist. Yeah. Jesus is the catechist. So, like we said, this person has already had lots of encounters with Jesus, continues to have encounters with Jesus. So Jesus is already catechizing. Jesus is already teaching. So what we want to do, instead of trying to break down the content and deliver it in a simplified format, we want instead to, like Diana said, ask questions, ask mystagogical type questions of the seeker to discover what God has already been revealing to this person, what Jesus has already been catechizing this person through those encounters that they've been having. So there are dozens of ways to think about mystagogical questions, but they have to do with exploring the mystery. So if you imagine the person in front of you is an embodiment of the mystery of Christ, this catechumen who's struggling, who can't get the content, they are already an embodiment of the mystery of Christ. What kinds of questions can we ask that would go deeper into that mystery? So things like what motivates you? What brings you? What drives you? What longing do you have? What need do you have? What wound do you have? And then when you're breaking open the Sunday scriptures, when you're doing this around the weekly celebration of the liturgy of the Mass, you can fine tune those questions around what they heard in the scripture, or what they heard in the music that they were singing, or what they noticed in the environment. So when you encountered Christ in that reading, or when you felt the movement of the Spirit when you saw that statue, or when you felt uplifted by the opening song, what was God telling you in that moment? Or what did you learn about yourself as a disciple in that moment? Those are all like examples of mystagogical questions.
We'll put a link to an article, a step-by-step guide to mystagogy, to give you a little bit of help on how to facilitate a mystagogical conversation. But that sense of that teaching, that catechesis, is less about delivering something and more about encountering the person of Jesus, who is already present in the life of the people in front of us. That is our catechetical job description, to lead a person deeper into that relationship. And so these mystagogical questions do exactly that. It's a way of pedagogy. It's a pedagogical method that is less about you and your responsibility of knowing the content, and it's more about your gift of uncovering the content that's already within the person's experience. And when you start there, you cannot help but help them see the content, quote unquote content, of our faith at their level, because you're starting with their level, their experience, rather than your need to communicate whatever theological expression you've learned yourself.
Yeah, that word theology is a little bit like the word content. It means different. It means a big thing to people who study theology like we did. But really, theology, if you break down the word, it's the ology of God, the understanding of who God is, or the exploration of who God is. And you can do that in an academic background with a theological curriculum, and you go through systematic theology and moral theology and practical theology and all those things. You can do that. But where it starts, if you imagine the first disciples, they didn't have any of that, right? Their theology, their ology was the pedagogy that they experienced, was walking around with Jesus, eating with Jesus, participating in the healing ministry of Jesus, participating in the touching hearts ministry of Jesus. These are all ways that they learned who God is. When they saw the face of Jesus, they saw the face of the Father. And so their revelation was not in a classroom experience. It was walking around, talking to people, interacting with people, and being the kind of people that Jesus was, that Jesus gave them an example for.
Yeah, I mean, just today at lunch, we were talking about some of the great theologians in our church history. So we think of Aquinas and Augustine and Dominic and Teresa and all of these amazing theologians, people who are really scholarly. But the thing about their scholarship was they were first disciples. They were first people who had a personal encounter with Christ and deepened their understanding of their love for Christ based on that relationship with Christ. And so for catechumens, really, we have to make sure that they are in love with Christ first. And the way you do that is by asking them where they encountered God, where they encountered Christ in their daily life. Now, the catechumen in question here, he happens to be a long-haul truck driver. And so a great way to ask him to theologize is to ask him on his trips, on these long road trips, where does he encounter Christ in the people that he meets? Or where in the beauty of the places that he travels through does he see the hand of God in his environment? Mm-hmm. Those are theological questions because they recognize that Jesus, the Holy Spirit, is the one catechizing our catechumen, and then our role is to help break open the meaning of those encounters with the catechumen.
Yeah, remember, Jesus is the catechist. You're not the catechist.
Yes, and we came up with another saying, discipleship, not scholarship.
Yeah.
I think that was what we said. So scholarship is very important, but without discipleship, it means nothing. So we have to make sure we are attending to the deep needs of each catechumen. And when we do that, we bring the scholarship, we bring the theology, not down to their level, but we make it come alive in their own experience.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really important in what you said about it's not down to their level. No. Because we might have more vocabulary or more education or a more complex understanding of some of the theological principles, complex in an academic sense, that doesn't make us at a higher level, that we're bringing stuff down to their level. It means that we have to be like Jesus and recognize in each individual person, he recognized the Spirit of God in the woman at the well differently than he recognized that same Spirit of God in Peter, for example. And he treated them differently based on how he recognized God in them.
Anything else you want to say about that?
I think that's about it. If you want to know more about a step-by-step way to do this mystagogical process, just click on that link that's in the comments, and that'll give you a more detailed explanation of it. And if you still have questions or want to chat some more about it, just send us an email, nick@tmarcia.com or diana@tmarcia.com, and we're happy to go into it more with you.
So you notice that our background is different than last week's background.
Yeah. So
where are we now?
We're in Orlando, Mickey Mouse Land.
Orlando, Florida, yes. We are really just across the street from Disney World, I think.
Where we are not going.
We're not. Yeah. We just happened to have a friend who offered to give us a place to stay for the week, and so we took her up on that offer, and we're just enjoying a little bit of warmer weather. Last week we were in Panama City Beach, Florida, in the Panhandle, and that was gorgeous, but it was also cold, and it's a little warmer here because we're a little further south, so we'll be here till Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for everything you do in this ministry. It's just so much of an honor to be working with you, and great to know that you're out there day after day plugging away at this.
So next week, we'll see you again. In the meantime, stay safe, wash your hands, keep your mask on, and take care of one another.
All right, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.